a very warm welcome to the NIBA exec. Gary, I'm going to start with you if I can. The board's been working on the NIBA strategy now for a long period of time, but particularly more recently. What's in it and why is it important?
First of all, why it's important, I think every organisation that is looking forward and looking to continually evolve and improve itself requires a pretty clear strategy. And we sat down in 2020, we created a strategy which was very industry focused, try and encourage the industry. We obviously had some legislative headwinds in that time which you needed to deal with, and a few other issues as well. We did it through COVID, so we knew what we were dealing with COVID. So last year we sat down and revisited it. We've talked ad nauseum on this event and last year around the three pillars, so I'm not going to go into what they're called, but it's fair to say that underneath those three headings there's a fair amount of work gone into creating some actions, creating some measures and a few areas. So I'll just touch on some of those. So in the representation model, what we've really got as an outcome, and we've got some measures in behind this, is to create a strong and meaningful relationships with governments. Now, that's a pretty big task because there's lots of governments in Australia, but obviously federally, it's a really important part of our remit. There is state legislations obviously around workers' compensation and other areas as well, including strata. And then there's a whole other lot of relationships that exist that, we talked about chain and resilience and planning in different areas. It's local government. So, we spend a lot of time in Canberra, trying to talk to Canberra. We spend some time with different work cover authorities and different state legislators in that space as well as pretty important parts of what on the members. So, but I think some of the measures we want is the number of engagements, but also the quality of engagements we have. So you heard Stephen Jones today. I thought it was quality outcome, right? So, it was a very clear message from the Minister of Financial Services on some pretty key issues that are relevant to all of us in this room. David Locke, I thought, gave some really informative discussion yesterday. Put us in our place, which is a great place to be. Not much to see here. Keep up the good work. That was, I think, a great message for us. Fair Trading New South Wales, obviously strata. We talk about strata a lot over the time. And so I think we're active in that space already. We've also just recently engaged some further government relations support just to give us some structure around how we're doing what we're doing. So, NIBA's a small team of people. It's pretty active. You've seen people running around doing lots of stuff here, and they've got other jobs they're doing at the same time they're here. So the reality is a small group, so we're going to get some external support with expertise in that area. So that's, I think, going to supercharge us again. On the professionalism stuff, we want to continue to drive excellence. Excellence in broking, excellence in your businesses, excellence with our partners to try and make sure that professionalism comes through. QPIBs are obviously a big measure. We want to see more QPIBs coming through. We want to see increased breach reporting, again, as a positive lens for continual learning and improvement. Obviously a code, a strong, robust code. And obviously we want to see if we can get those AFCA reports, complaints down even further. So that would be an ideal outcome for us to measure. And just on the community front, there's a lot of work going on at a high level to engage the broking community. Before I get onto that, I just want to reference again Backpacks for SA Kids. Di will talk a little bit about it. But I want to call out to everyone here, particularly those commercial businesses in the room, we probably all are at some point. If we can get more money to them, we've got a very kind offer from Zurich to go dollar for dollar for every dollar we raise for Backpack for Kids out of this convention. NIBA's made a contribution. Zurich's done a great thing. They've got a ceiling at 10 grand, so if we get 10 grand plus NIBA's on top, then I think they're up to 5 and a bit this morning when they started. So dig deep, and Zurich will dig deeper. So that's great from them. So just getting energy getting back to our community, getting engagement, all brokers, all organisations. The convention I think has been a success. Last year was a success. The lunch series was a record in the set of numbers. Record set of meetings we've got Richard onto, and all of us as local state representatives and other industry leaders. I think we want more people coming forward, putting their names forward into the awards. The awards are quality awards. You see that again tonight. So that's important. I just basically want also to make sure we can amplify your voices, and if that was the cue for yesterday's interruption, please don't interrupt today. We don't want any more singing. So we actually want to support you and get external reporting and validation for the value brokers add back to the communities as a whole. And that's part of our voice getting louder on your behalf. So they're the sort of underlying parts of a strategy document, which, as I said, we've got quite a complex document that we go through in regular meetings board, but the reality is that's sort of a high-level take on what it is, and I know we'll talk on some of those subjects in a bit more depth as we go through.
Thank you, Gary. Just quick follow-on question. Do we have a target for raising for backpacks for kids? Where it feels like we're at 20 to 25 right now.
Well, if we can get 10 minimum, NIBA's put in 5, Zurich put in another 10, there's 25, so, add brokerage on the top, 20%, another $5,000, plus the admin fee, of course, huge. Feels like 30 to me, but, maybe that's...
Minimum 30.
Yeah.
Di, do you jump in?
I was just going to say it feels more like 50 to me.
Oh. Gee, you charge a lot of brokerage.
Well, it's a charity that's close to my heart. I'm very glad that NIBA accepted that this should be the charity. 4 or 5 years ago, we're getting off track here a bit, but I'll talk about it. 4 or 5 years ago, my daughter and I decided we wanted to do some volunteering, and we're a long way down the track. We identified Backpack for Kids as being something crucial, not well understood, not well advertised, no government funding, but a tremendous need. And I don't know if you were crying, but I was certainly crying yesterday morning as Rachel was talking about how important it is. So COVID came, we didn't get to volunteer, but certainly now, this is my last year on the exec, so not so much NIBA volunteering, and I intend to pick that up again. So please do dig deep and show Backpack for Kids exactly what insurance can do for the community tonight.
Di, I was just going to pick up that same question just around NIBA strategy and some of the things that you see important that are perhaps still to be done.
Well, it's interesting because Gary just talked about the strategy of insurance broking work that we did during COVID 4 years ago, and we were actually looking at what insurance broking would look like in 2025. I actually had a bit of a wacky thing. We had a lot of homework to do during that, and we had to come back and have a discussion about what we thought broking would look like in 2025. I actually came back and said, well, there was a really bad disaster in 2023, and the direct market failed the consumer, and a quick fix was for the government to introduce legislation that all insurance had to be purchased through an insurance broker. I think the rest of the board looked at me as if I was wacky, but actually Stephen Jones this morning actually commended the role of insurance brokers, and I thought, well, maybe it wasn't so wacky after all. Don't think it's going to happen by 2025, but it was an important piece of work that we did to look at, and I look back now and think, I don't know about you guys, but I look back and think, wow, we're almost at 2025. So I do continue, and when I was president, you would have all heard me say that I think the role of insurance broking will look very different in 2025 to what it does today. I still think that's true. It will evolve and it will continuously change. You've heard people talk about risk management, and I think every insurance broker needs to be focusing a lot more on that risk management and risk minimisation with their clients, because as it was pointed out, insurance is one way of clients minimising their risk. It doesn't eliminate it, and therefore we have some really important work to do to help clients actually work towards how they can potentially eliminate risk that is not insurable.
Nick, thanks, Di. Nick, you're incoming in February.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic runway and pathway of things that we've done. Well, as incoming Pres, what's your vision for NIBA, and what do you think your key priorities will be?
Thanks, Richard. I think the key one, and we've spoken about it a number of times over the course of the last couple of days, is the updated code of practice. But I think instead of us just looking at the words that are currently on the page and analysing those and and just seeing if they're fit for purpose. I think we've got a real opportunity to pause and to look at the way, to Di's point, that our industry, profession, is evolving, and we're going through a huge amount of change, which I think is all coming together virtually at the same time. The technology change, we've spoken about AI, the impact that's having to a limited degree now, but the potential is huge. The increase in platforms, and that's one aspect. Then you've got another aspect around the generational change that's occurring. A lot of people in this room and outside this room are people who've started their brokerage businesses, and they're now looking at that next generation, the succession plan, and how that fits with their plans and what that looks like, and whether that ultimately leads to a consolidation in the market or some other change. So I think there's a number of influences: the increasing size and relevance of the AR groups, the changing generations within the brokers, the technology impact. I think that's all great food for thought, Richard, for us to think about what the code looks like. And for us, we're going to throw everything at this next code review. We're going to work very hard at engaging with you, with our 15,000 NIBA members, with all the relevant stakeholders, and to ensure that each step along the way is transparent and that you are absolutely able to access any updates as we go through this review process. Because it's really important we get this right. As I said, we're in the midst of a huge amount of change, both in society and with our industry. So we need to get this code right, and you need to have your voice heard in that code. You are a key stakeholder, the key stakeholder in this code review. We will consult widely, but you need to have that voice within the code. I think the other big piece we need to just finish off on is getting closer to the key stakeholders, getting closer to government. And we've engaged Council House, who have been great already with increasing our government relations. And why are we doing that? In the previous breakout session on regulation, Alexandra Horden from the ICA came out with a fantastic line. She said, if you're not at the table, you're generally on the menu. And I think that is fantastic context for what we need to do to increase our engagement and our relevance across those key stakeholders, including government.
We might just jump into the code conversation, Nick, and I'll just follow on for you. Again, came out of the last discussion, which is NIBA is a broad church. It's a large community. There are businesses and practices in regional Australia and downtown dealing with small businesses and global large ones. How do we make sure that we bring the whole NIBA community, give them all a chance to have a say as we kind of go through that change process?
Yeah. Look, for me, it's we've got to really work hard at that engagement piece, Richard, and there's any number of ways we can reach people. We can do it obviously through a website, but we can do it through webinars. I'd like to next year get more visible. We've had great success in Wollongong most recently, and in Newcastle prior to that, with NIBA sessions in the afternoon. I did one with in Hobart with Phil Kewen last year. I think they're a great way to get people along, to hear our message, to get your feedback, and to just enjoy time together. I think one of the things that, to your point, Richard, we are so spread out. We're in every high street across Australia now. Being able to get together and have those conversations with peers is critical, and that's, I think, one of the key ways we can do it. As I said, there's any number of online ways to do it, but nothing beats a conversation.
Di, you've been passionately involved in the code processes over time. I mean, what's your ambition once we get to the end of this process, as we kind of started the outset?
Yes, I was very involved in the last code review. And I think for me, it's clear that the code does not need to be rewritten. It needs to be enhanced. Those that know me would know that I'm quite passionate about the journey of self-regulation. And to me, it's the most important tool we have to stay ahead of the game. We all need to keep improving. We had a session this morning on client expectations. They're definitely changing. For me, and not even an acceptance, actually embracing and engaging with that change and what that needs to look like, very focused on the fact that the client outcome is our main consideration, and better engaging with our clients, because I think we are probably one of the most undervalued professions there is, and that's our fault. If clients don't value what we do, it's because we're not articulating it well enough. And one of the things that I really wanted the terms of engagement requirement in our current code to do was to be a tool to educate, a tool to start conversation with your clients about exactly what we do, because there's a lot of detail. You unpack a lot of differences between policy wordings, differences, premiums we know is you pay for what you get. And so there are a lot of differences that can actually impact those client outcomes when something goes wrong. So that engagement with clients was that was the start of that journey, and just to continue the journey of transparency and conversation and education of clients, because I so many times, and a part of my role is to get involved when things do go wrong. And, often when we get the right outcome for the client turns around and says to me, I didn't understand what it meant to have an insurance broker until you came along and helped me. And I'm sure you've all got a multitude of those stories. But that just tells me that at BJS, we've still got some work to do in that education piece. And that will be ever changing as the world changes.
And Gary, the board spends a lot of time, every board meeting, we're spending a lot of time thinking about the code, thinking about self-regulation, thinking about engagement. Is there anything you wanted to add as we kind of head into the next 12 months?
I think that, to Nick's point and Di's, the consultation has to be broad, but we are broad. So there's going to be hopefully a lot of voices coming from all sorts of parts of Australia, all sorts of organisations, sizes, scales, differences, etc. But I'm sort of the view of Di. I think the substantive document we have today is very solid, very firm. I recall Prue talking about it last year and talking about vulnerable clients, and I think we've got some great stuff in there. And I keep reflecting on Shane Fitzsimmons' comment about how vulnerable people are at those times and how they need trust. And we're there, and our code needs to support that overall trust delivery at a difficult time. And we can give them consistency and build that trust to every part of the insurance broking fraternity in Australia. So I don't think it's revolution, I think it's evolution in the code. I think the substantive parts are good, but there's no point us three saying it. It's really what you say, and we want that to be able to articulate it in a certain way. We know we'll get broad engagement with AFCA, IBCC, consumer groups, and we're going to work pretty hard on getting that balance. We'll do it independently. Richard and the team will do that, and then we'll bring a document back to the board for us to have a look through, and we'll be back engaging with everybody else. So I think the core's right, but we spent a lot of time last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, to come through. I also think, my own personal view again is, I think we should look to review the code every 5 years, not 3. It only feels like we finished the damn thing last year. We did, but the reality is it's here again, and I think that's, we don't need revolution therefore, but at the same time it just seems too close to me. We almost aren't settled in. So we'll do the review, but I think one of the reviews will be, we'll test the waters of the community and the regulators and everyone else around. Is 3 years too small and too short a time frame, and should 5 years be the window? So my personal view is it just doesn't feel like it feels like a rolling review at the moment.
Correct.
And that's not I think healthy for everyone to be able to implement what we all want to do. So
awesome, folks. Gary did mention your voice. As ever, if you've got questions, please, through your app in the session, just toss questions through. They'll come through here. A little later on, we will get some question time. I'm just going to segue a little into a couple of pieces. The context is that, as everyone knows, we put out the annual broker market survey. The purpose of that survey is to get the community, the NIBA community's view on, so how are our partner insurers tracking? And tonight we're going to make a number of awards the large insurer, the specialty insurer, and the underwriting agency. And that's been its primary purpose. This year we tossed a couple of other questions in, and I just wanted to share some of the insights. We got pretty close to 1,000 respondents this time around, up 37%. And I'll just draw your attention to question 42. Question 42 is, which of these do you value the most from your NIBA membership? Was question 42. That's in the dark blue line. And question 43 is, which of these do you want NIBA to focus on? We shared this discussion at board on Sunday, and when I initially saw this data, I went, wow. By a country mile, the most important thing from NIBA members in terms of what you most value from your NIBA membership is education and training, and also the focus. Industry representation, policy and advocacy came very strongly in as number 2, and you can kind of see the difference between the 2 lines. There's a gap there, and that's a gap, to Nick's earlier point, it's a place to spend more time and energy on. Hence the decision to spend more time and effort connecting politically, connecting with regulators, and getting our policy voice stronger. And then you can kind of see the community pieces coming through loud and clear through the insurance advisor, the way we communicate, the way we do conventions and the lunches and so forth, the way we think about career support. Interestingly, the career support has got a 10-point difference between how we're going and what the focus should be. And Cam, in the context of the next discussion around Insure Your Future, together with the discussions and the school kids we had yesterday, feels like an important a bit of work to focus on. So this is a first cut for us. It's a really interesting one. There's a little bit more which we won't share in the context of this, but what we did have was a couple of questions which we did want to throw to you. And the way you can get your question answered, I think we're just going to go to a Slido piece. So you can scan the Slido piece, or you can go slido.com and pop in that number, if you wouldn't mind doing that. The question we wanted to ask you, and the first one is, does this audience agree, a la with the online the broker market survey audience, that NIBA has to have a greater role in the area of education and training and kind of the professionalism, the professional development piece? So if you can have a crack at that, you can see the results immediately turning up. So this is live polling as we go. If you can have a chance at that, that will be fantastic, because it'll set the scene for the next question. And again, a really interesting discussion that we're starting to have at board around, since the exit of the NIBA College, what role does CPD, convention curation, activities that we do in the States, webinars, all the things that we curate, how do we think about that as a curriculum? How do we partner in with the education providers that are in the market alley to work effectively together to curate leading content? Because like everything that's going on in our sector, there's change in the air. And life with self-regulation conversation, do we lead it? Do we follow, or do we sit somewhere in the middle? So I think there's our answer. Pretty much validates exactly what was 79 to 21%. So thank you for that. The second question I'm going to ask, and what we'll start to see, is a word cloud. So this hopefully will be really interesting. What are the key areas you believe that we should focus on? And hopefully on your Slido piece, there's an opportunity to pop the words in, and then the word cloud will start to come up as it is. So please interact and add your thinking. And again, this will be really valuable in informing what we do. Folks, as it's happening, I don't know, Di, Gary, Nick, is there any stuff you wanted to comment on?
Well, that's been pretty clear, that first question, Richard. There was 160 respondents at 79%. So if ever there's some guidance, that's guidance.
First thing I'd say is I should have brought my glasses up on stage.
It's big behind you.
Yeah.
What I'm picking up, interestingly, out of that is we know about education advocacy, but the claims piece is coming up, right? So there's a few different words there, but something we're starting to work on to support the professionals in our brokerages that do claims. claims management, be that TPA work or just generally, claims advocacy for clients. So I think that's coming through a bit louder than or pleasingly coming through from my perspective.
Yeah, there's three key themes there: advocacy, education, regulation.
Yeah.
A lot around promoting the role of the broker.
I think, to your point, Gary, claims is coming through, but also things like mental health, lobbying are important.
Folks, that is awesome audience participation. We're live. It's the first time we've done this, and thank you for making this useful. We all this data we'll capture and track, and then kind of debrief along with the long form research that we've pulled out of the broker market survey.
There's a few general themes in there that have come out bigger, but there's some other words in there that actually amplify those as well. So I think the regulation one is in a few different themes. The claims theme's got a couple of ways through it. Risk management comes up. So I think there's a real good amount of information in there, very rich.
We might just leave the word cloud up there, but maybe just focus now on. So thank you for your participation, and maybe we'll just continue on with the discussion. Di, I wanted to turn to you. There's obviously, the last few months has been pretty intense. We've had the strata issue raise its head. We've had a lot of stuff going on in work cover in WA and iCare in New South Wales. What do you see as the key areas and NIBA's role in this kind of advocacy positioning piece, which is the big strong green thing right in the middle of our screen?
Yeah, it is, and you've mentioned a couple of things that are really topical, and I think the strata insurance work cover discussion has been a theme through a lot of the sessions in the questions that have been asked. I think our role is really important to advocate for our members, and clearly the members in the room agree that advocacy is a really important thing. But also too at, work cover WA and what's happening there is very much a state thing. But I think the divisional committees also have a really important role in that advocacy and getting more involved in that. And one of the examples of that is Max, the divisional chair here in South Australia, and myself met with Business SA recently. I was not aware of the number of legislation differences on the table by the state government, and we talked about a couple of them, the mandatory DFIB being one of them, and just about the risk management and insurance implications of something like that, as having gone through that at BJS when we introduced that many years ago. And so to actually partner with those groups in each state and the divisional committees being really involved, I think there's a lot of state legislation that does slip through our fingers that is really important to the members in the states you're in. So I think we could really, ramp that up as well as an important thing.
I'm going to come back to all the state committees and the OIP committees and so on. I just there's a question here from Josh, just picking up an extension. As an industry, we know we do a lot of good. However, with some of the strata issues recently highlighted, not everything is a bed of roses. How do we ensure that we kind of manage into that and lean into that conversation?
You're asking me?
Sure.
These guys would be happy. Look, I think as the strata insurance and some of the bad practices, and you'd have to say they are bad practices, were called out, was when I was president of NIBA, and I had a lot of discussion through the John Trowbridge report about things, and to say I was a bit naive is probably true. I thought I wouldn't be surprised after the age I am, but you can be surprised at some of the things that you find out. I'm a firm believer that it is a minority that bad practices are coming from a minority of areas, but we all have a responsibility to grow, to get better, and to call out bad behaviours. Another thing that's really strong in our code is an obligation on members to report breaches to the IBCC if they have evidence of breaches, not hearsay, not anecdotal or I've heard on the grapevine, but real evidence of bad practices, because to stay silent, is not the right thing to do. And that was one of the important things that we did in the code review, was change who could report a breach to the IBCCC. And I think that was a really important thing that we did. And so together, we all need to get better, and we all grow all the time. I'm not sure if that's really answering your question, but it goes further than strata insurance is an example of, as I say, I believe a minority, but in large numbers in terms of impacted consumers, which is not great. And so we all have an obligation to continue to raise the bar and get better at everything that we do.
I mean, that's the thing about self-regulation. You take the good with the bad, and you gotta safeguard the perimeter and find out where stuff's going bad and fix it, which is a beauty. Sorry, Gary.
I was going to say, if you think about the issue and you then look at what's on the screen and you think about what we do, we need to advocate for the industry, what it should be doing, what it's doing well. In that particular space, we should be advocating for the code. We've got a self-regulatory framework. It's got transparency in it. It's got disclosure requirements in it. So we've actually got a great platform to deal with this issue. We've got to make sure we get the right advice as to who to advocate to. We've got to make sure we've got the right legal backing to what we're doing. And we've got to be loud and proud. What can Fair Trading New South Wales do to ban commissions? You heard the Minister again. Commissions are a federal legislation. Full stop. Right? So, there's some headlines that have been thrown out there that's factual. But if Fair Trading New South Wales aren't able to deal with commission as a whole, then they can deal with how strata managers are transparent, how strata manage to disclose, what they can do. That's their piece. Right? It's actually not necessarily the broker's regulatory framework that they can actually impart on them. We then go back to our code and how we do what we do, and the sort of things we would encourage every member to do on every product that is out there and every service you provide. So I think the frameworks are there, but in this case, we go and rearguard a little bit as a bit of front foot. But we'll run pretty quick. We'll catch up. We're at the table. We're not on the menu. To your point, Nick. So we're now there. We'll now supercharge what we're going to do, and I think be able to communicate back to you some stories that this is how we can respond as an industry, as a collective, to all become better.
Awesome. Nick, I'm going to go to you if I can. We went out to members over the last couple of weeks and invited questions. We got a couple of them. So I'm just going to throw in the context of this discussion, this from Surab. Nick, what are the three key strategic issues that we're going to focus on into 25? I think we've had a decent discussion around that. Second part of the question, really interesting. So what support does NIBA need from its members, and how can they engage?
Yeah, this is really key. Whilst there's a NIBA board, it's in front of you here, there is a much larger group, including the state committees, YPs. There's any number of ways that you can get involved in NIBA. But don't need to be involved day to day on a committee to have your say. So what I'd encourage is, if you're looking for ways to get engaged with NIBA, by all means, get involved with state committees. Get involved with the mentor program, YPs, Ensure Your Future. Just get involved. If you're feeling strongly about something, have your say. Don't stew on it. Don't be in isolation. Reach out to us. All of us are very accessible. So please, I'd encourage you, if you have something on your mind, or to Di's point, if you observe something going on, you need to let somebody know. And that's what I'd say. If you're looking for a way to get involved or have a voice, there are any number of different channels of which you can do that through NIBA. So please get involved.
Thanks, Nick. Gary, this one's for you. Question from Matt. Theme of the conference is going beyond the status quo. We've spent a lot of time thinking about that. Gary, Matt asks, what tips would you give for brokers to think about going beyond the status quo, to challenging the way things are today?
What is old is new again in a lot of ways. I actually like just sitting down, talking to people, sharing stories with them about other experiences, and actually giving them the advice based upon their business. If you like core stuff, you understand their business, the actual advice part's generally very, very easy, or you understand their organisational structure, it becomes easy. I personally think we need to start to think about innovation. I reckon that the market itself is shifting. There's a risk acceptance discussion to be having with the market, the core markets, the underwriting agencies that are coming through. There are, again, I go back to the resilience one, we go back to the affordability and availability of insurance. I personally don't think that any amount of investment in resilient infrastructure in Australia is going to stop the next flood, the next fire happening next year, the year after. There's just not enough money to do what's needed to fix this. And you can take a global view on that, and it's exactly the same anywhere in the world. The recent hurricanes in the US, there's less than 10% of people buy flood cover. They're just getting smashed. So it's an uninsured exposure. We can help innovate. Is it parametric? Is it certain self-insurance models? Is it co-insurance models? What are we actually there to do to look to the future, to advise on? And that's, to me, where we've got to start thinking about the changing market dynamic. We all know we need insurer capital to help spread that risk. That capital will come from different sources at different times. But if we don't continue to innovate with our thinking, push our capital providers, the insurers, to also push themselves into new zones, be that Lloyd's, be that Australian markets, doesn't really matter. If we can't innovate in that sense, we won't provide the protection to the clients in the future that we actually need to be providing, or be able to advise them properly on what they should do as in the self-insurance model or a co-insurance model. And I think that's really going beyond the status. I think we've got to continue to evolve the actual discussion first, and then how we do what we do to help that client protect its risk.
I'd agree with that, Gary. The public is that much better educated about insurance. They understand that there is an affordability and an availability issue, and a number of them understand the fundamentals that lead to that. So I think we've got a public that's increasingly educated, as you've heard from Stephen Jones, very educated government, probably, I dare say, one of the best educated ministers on insurance and how it all works. So I think we've got to stay, to Gary's point, stay ahead of that and continue to innovate because, as I said, there will be a public expectation. They're understanding more about insurance and how it works, that their broker is providing some new solutions or innovative thinking.
Folks, the clock is counting down. As this session's timekeeper, I'm going to go, let's go brief. Great question from Daniel. What is the venue for the 2025 NIBA convention? Hold that thought. I will cover that later. Another great question from Nathan. Has NIBA considered a formal apprenticeship pathway for young people out of school? So thank you for that. I'm going to just ask each of the exec to answer the final question, which is, it's now about to be the dawn of 2025. Where's NIBA at 2030? And Di, maybe I'll start with you.
Oh, thank you again, Richard.
My pleasure. Happy to start with Nick if you want.
No, I'm happy with the way it ordered. That's good.
Well, it'd be fair to say I haven't really thought about when NIBA will be in 2030. I'll certainly be off the board. This is my last year as exec, and I will take the opportunity to say it's been an absolute honour to go through that process of being your vice president, president, immediate past president. I've got far more out of it than I've put into it, and it has been a huge honour. I'm hoping that NIBA will be stronger, better, and more a vital part of every insurance broker's business thinking. The association, and I'll talk a bit later in my closing address on that point, and I might just leave it at that because I will talk a bit about that.
Fantastic. Gary?
NIBA will be definitely bigger because we will supercharge the industry. If we're 15,000, I think we can get that up significantly. So I think we'll have to be bigger to support more of you. So I think that's really positive. I think we will be at the table with government. And I think we'll, and I said this last year, I think we'll become more thought of as advisors, risk advisors, still transacting brokerages, but risk advisors that deliver outcomes beyond just the transaction. And that's the way I think we'll be thought of. I don't think we'll be the National Risk Advisors Association. I don't think that's what we'll be, but I think we'll continually have different streams on claims, on risk management, and on general broader advice than on services throughout the year, not just on the transactional piece. That's
Thank you,
right.
Gary. Nick?
3Rs, we'll have renewal through that generational change I spoke about. We'll be respected as an industry body. We'll be relevant and we'll be visible. That'll be how I see NIBA in 5 years' time.
Folks, on behalf of all NIBA members present and online, and we'll watch this later, a huge shout out to Di, who's put in huge amounts of time, to the whole executive, in fact to the whole board. You know, people don't step up to lead and serve for glory. They step up to make it a better place. And in the 5 months I've been here, it's one of the great strengths of NIBA is the strength and capability and authenticity of the people who are here to serve. So on behalf of all of us here, a giant thank you.